Vaping is dangerous, period. It is addicting young people to nicotine at a very early age. And nicotine is highly addictive. We do not know the long-term health effects of the use of this product. Vaping is better than smoking. Technically, yes, but so what? Smoking is terrible.
Governor Cuomo also announcing an emergency executive action that to ban the sale of e-cigarettes. He says that e-cigs, they're marketed to young people, so he also wants to raise the age to 21 for people to be able to buy them. President Trump is even speaking out about vaping. He says the FDA, they're working on a federal ban on flavored vapes. This all comes in the wake of a surge in vaping-related illnesses and even deaths. Health officials, they're investigating nearly 400 cases of pulmonary problems, including 6 fatalities. The specific causes, they're still unclear, but we do know that some sort of chemical in the product is the likely culprit. We also know that many of the problems are coming from cannabis-related products as well as nicotine vapes. Now, earlier today, Andrew spoke with a doctor who's also a former White House advisor.
Rich, thanks very much. I'm joined now by Dr. Janette Nesheiwat. And doctor, it seems like we've got 2 distinct issues and concerns coming together at the same time. The focus on youth vaping and how to prevent that, as well as the recent spate of vaping-related illnesses and deaths. Should we view them as separate issues, or should we view them as being joined?
I think we should view them as joined because most of the deaths that we're seeing are in young patients. We're not seeing them in 70 and 80-year-olds. So we need to first of all target we need to first acknowledge that these young children and teenagers and middle schoolers have been targeted with, cotton candy, fruit-flavored, sweet vaping. That's what initially lured them in and enticed them to start vaping, because most of these young kids who vape, they never were cigarette smokers. And then what's happened is, they experiment. The vaping products become contaminated or adulterated. They use ingredients other than the vape products, such as, maybe contaminated marijuana cartridges. And that is what's causing, most likely, we don't know for sure, but that could be contributing to the lung diseases, the lung illnesses that we're seeing.
There's no question that vaping is bad for young people. There's no question that flavored vapes are more attractive to young people, and that there has been marketing that seems to be oriented towards them. The question, of course, is how to respond. We certainly have other flavored adult products, whether you're talking about flavored cigars or flavored alcohol or flavored beer. Does banning the flavor stop the problem?
So that's just one step in the path towards cutting this out and eliminating children, middle schoolers, and high schoolers from vaping. That's just one step. What we need to do, in addition to banning those flavors that are enticing and alluring to children, is we also need to look at banning commercials and taking disciplinary action to vape shops that sell to children and to children that attempt to purchase these vaping products. We also need FDA regulation. They need to get involved, and we need transparency. We need to know what exactly are in these vaping products, the ingredients, what exactly is in them. And on top of that, what's most important is we need education. Education at a very young age. We need education, and we do that education, it starts at home with parents teaching their kids to stay away from smoking and vaping and drugs and alcohol. And also, at schools, we should probably have this as part of curriculum. We have sex education, we have physical education, we need drug and alcohol education as well. I think it's so important to get them at a very young age, to teach them that this is harmful to their bodies, to their brains, to their underdeveloped lungs. And I think putting all these little things together, it can be very helpful, in addition to having our youth advocate to their peers as well. I think that's very powerful and impactful. If we have one teenager saying to their friends, hey guys, don't do it, this is bad for you, that can definitely play a role. So I think it's not just doing one thing, banning flavors. I think it's a combination of actions that we need to take to help prevent this spreading, worsening crisis and epidemic, because most of these kids, these young kids, they get hooked on nicotine at a very young age, then they're going to be hooked for life potentially. And about half of these young kids who are vaping, approximately half of them will go on in about a year to become regular cigarette smokers. And cigarette smoking is the #1 cause of preventable death in this country.
You mentioned the questions as about what's in these vapes. does anybody do quality control on this? Is there any way to know what's in it, or do you have to sort of guess based on whomever produced the product? And is there a role here for the FDA? Should the FDA have approved this? Does this point to a flaw in our approval process for new things like vapes?
Exactly. That's why I think we should have transparency to know exactly what is put in these vaping e-juices, what they call it. We know that they have the basic solvent, propylene glycol, glycerin, and then sometimes these artificial flavors are added like cinnamon and vanilla, which have been shown to have chemicals that are highly toxic and cause cell death and kill bronchial cells. But I do think we need to have FDA regulation. We need transparency of what ingredients are in these vaping products. We saw last week a young teenager, he took one puff, he inhaled one puff from a vaping device, and he collapsed. He could have had an anaphylactic allergic reaction. We don't know, but I think it's important to have transparency of what these ingredients are. But on top of that, we have, young adults, teenagers, kids that are also potentially adding in, street drugs, off the black market, maybe contaminated marijuana or, other types of drugs that are potentially causing this severe lung disease. I've actually had very young kids, young teenagers come in to see me with chest pain, severe chest pain and shortness of breath and wheezing. And one patient came in, he was coughing so hard his lung collapsed and he had to be admitted to the hospital. So it's very serious, it's very dangerous. And it's not just dangerous for young teenagers and kids. A recent study just came out that showed, out of the University of Pennsylvania, that showed even if you vape without nicotine and without THC, that it showed that it affects your circulation, your blood flow, your oxygenation. So, adults should keep that in mind as well, even though some adults have used vaping as a means for smoking cessation. That's still, important to keep that new information in mind.
Well, and that leads to my next question, which is the comparison between vaping and cigarette smoking for adults, at least. It seems like we don't know a whole lot about what's in vape products, but based on what we do know, how does that compare with the dangers for cigarette smoking?
Sure. So if you're vaping instead of using regular traditional combustible cigarettes, there is less tar. Obviously, carbon monoxide shouldn't be there either. But I think we may be trading, using the best of two evils. I think it's a different type of chemical, and I am still concerned because of the potential for long-term damage to the lungs, to the heart, to your blood vessels. So we don't know the exact long-term effects, but we do know the short-term effects of vaping. People with severe lung damage, we know that that's happening now, so it can only potentially be worse down the road. But regular cigarette smoking has the tar, the carbon monoxide, many other carcinogens, and is linked to many different types of cancers, lung cancers, bladder cancers, prostate cancers, you name it. But I think it's using vaping it's not just like you're inhaling mist and water. There are still some harms associated with it, even though some people have said they have used vaping as a means for smoking cessation. That's great, but we don't know all the data yet. There could potentially be long-term damage to your body that we're still investigating. We still need studies to show this. And it's important for adults to understand that vaping is not the only means for smoking cessation. There's medications, there's nicotine gum, there's patches, there's support therapy. Vaping is not the only way to quit smoking cigarettes.
Dr. Janette Nesheiwat is a family and emergency room doctor. Thank you very much for a few minutes. And Rich, let's send it back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, when we come back, we will switch gears and talk a little sports. We're going to head out to MetLife Stadium, where the injury-depleted Jets, they're getting ready to play the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football. Then we're going to show you why Yankee great Mariano Rivera was at the White House today.